Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear my voice loud and clear? Okay, thank you so much for responding, everyone. So, good day, everyone. Before we start this lesson, allow us to introduce ourselves first. My name is Althea Janchel Ampania, and I am here with.
Hi, my name is Bien Jaylord Buenape, and today we will be talking about the curriculum response of the higher education for the teacher education amid the pandemic and beyond.
That is right. We will be talking about the higher education adapted the curriculum in our present situation. However, before we head on to our discussion proper, let us first hear about our desired learning outcomes for this lesson.
At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to do the following: identify the implication of the occurrence of COVID-19 pandemic to the teacher education curriculum, propose adjustment to the curriculum during a pandemic, identify ways and means to address the curriculum vis-a-vis the situation that prevailed during the pandemic.
Hey, thank you so much, Serbian, for telling us our desired learning outcomes for this lesson. Now, let us head on to our discussion proper. Please say, I am ready if you are ready to learn about our topic for today. Okay, thank you so much for responding, everyone. Let me begin with painting a picture of our situation at the beginning of the pandemic and our present situation now, since everyone seems to be ready enough to hear about the lesson that we have prepared for you for today. Okay, so the post COVID 19 global health crisis has resulted to unprecedented challenges economically, socially, politically, all over the world. More than just a health crisis, it has resulted to an educational crisis. When the lockdown and enhanced community quarantines were declared across the world and, of course, in our country, the Philippines, educational institutions were unprepared on how to establish academic continuity since students cannot anymore report to the university. Continuing the academic engagement has been a challenge for teachers and students alike. To ensure continuity of learning, higher education institutions resorted to online learning. However, the shift to online mode of delivery has caused problems in terms of access and connectivity. Further analysis reveals that the difficulty in shifting to online modality is the unpreparedness of teachers to shift to flexible modality as the syllabus and learning activities are geared towards traditional face to face delivery. So, the post COVID 19 scenario will never be the same as long as a foolproof vaccine that can combat any variant will be made available. And as of today, we know that such a vaccine has not yet been concocted as the virus itself continues to mutate rather into different forms. So, thus, social distancing will still have to be observed even long after quarantines are lifted, and a gathering of large crowds would still be discouraged. The traditional classroom face to face delivery will pose as a risk for contamination. In other words, the new normal will soon pervade in the areas of business, commerce, industry, and of course, education. Thus, universities and educational institutions have to prepare for the new normal teaching delivery to ensure academic continuity amid and beyond the pandemic. However, one emerging concern during the pandemic is the provision for flexible learning modality to mitigate the risk of face to face interaction. And with the shift to flexible learning or flexible teaching and learning modality in the provision for flexible curriculum, now we ask, do curriculum programs need to be changed to support the trajectory towards flexible teaching and learning? In the Philippines, the standard written curriculum are anchored on the programs, standards, and guidelines or PSGs of the different disciplines as recommended by the Commission on Higher Education or CHED. So, do we really need to modify the current curricula to make them flexible and resilient? And we also need to ask, how did our educational system adjust and adapt itself so that it may continue to provide the students with what is essential while considering the limiting factors that we have today? Let us find that out together as we discuss the teacher education response to the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. So, the first thing that we did is to modify the curriculum. But what exactly do we mean when we say curriculum modification? Curriculum modification is the process of making adjustments to existing programs in higher education, specifically teacher education, in order to respond to the needs of the learners amid and post pandemic. So, curriculum modification is basically the changes that we made in the curriculum so that the curriculum may still provide the skills, knowledge, values, among others that the students would need despite being in the pandemic and after the pandemic. It is also the changes that we made so that we may attain the purpose or we may fulfill the purpose of the curriculum itself, okay? Regardless of the situation or the pandemic that we are in right now and the post pandemic scenario that we will be facing after this pandemic ends, if it will ever end, okay? Let's hope that it will. So, now, what exactly are the steps that we took to modify the curriculum? First, we have focusing on the essentials, mapping the needed and enduring outcomes in the recommended and written curriculum. So, the challenge during the pandemic is how to create balance between relevant basic competencies for the students to acquire and the teacher's desire to achieve the entire outcomes of the curriculum. To solve this challenge, the teacher needs to revisit the existing curriculum and analyze the outcomes of the program or course. The mapping of the course outcomes should be done to determine the needed and the enduring outcomes, and which outcomes should be given emphasis or which should be emphasized. So here we have the needed outcomes and the enduring outcomes. The needed outcomes are the desired knowledge, skills, and values that are required to learn higher concepts. They are defined as competencies that learners need for continuation to subsequent level of concept. They are considered as prerequisite competencies. So, when we say needed outcomes, these are the learning outcomes that would give the students the knowledge, the values, and the skills that they would need in order for them to be able to fully grasp, comprehend, and understand the next level of learning by which they would have to undergo. So, for example, in our curriculum, there are courses that have a prerequisite course to them, right? There would be courses uh, in your list of courses that you have to take from first year to fourth year that would say that there is a prerequisite and this subject is this, and that's because those two subjects are most likely connected with each other. It's like a continuation of the previous subject, and in order for you to be able to fully comprehend and maximize your learning in the next subject or in the next level of the next course, the needed outcomes are to be attained, or the needed outcomes need to be attained or taken by you in order for you to fully comprehend the next one. Okay, without those it would be difficult for the students to be able to grasp or to be able to grasp rather or fully comprehend the next level. That is why they are considered as prerequisite competencies. On the other hand naman, we have the enduring outcomes. The enduring outcomes are the competencies that are necessary not just for succeeding in a certain topic, but are useful beyond a single unit of study. They are the knowledge, skills, and values that have overarching applicability in real life situations. So when we say enduring outcomes, these are the competencies that would give the students skills and knowledge and values, among others, that would exceed or that would go beyond the gates of the academe. It would give the students the knowledge, values, and skills, among others, as a human person and not as a mere student of the academe. So in curriculum modification, enduring outcomes can be given emphasis, and identifying and mapping the needed and enduring outcomes can also shed light on overlapping, so the teacher can decide when the competency would be retained or merged. Now, here we have the two examples of outcomes taken from the sample syllabus in Art Appreciation, which is a course in the general education curriculum in higher education. Please focus your attention on the left side of your screen for box A. Box A is the existing statement of outcomes in a syllabus. Here it says at the end of the 3-unit course, the students should be able to first, mount an art exhibit, concept development, post production, marketing, documentation, critiquing. Second, create their own works of art and curate their own production of exhibit. And to your right in box B are the modified statements of outcome to cover the essential. It says here that at the end of the 3-unit course, the students should be able to first create their own work of art through virtual production or exhibit. In this way, there is only one outcome instead of two. So, the outcomes in both box A and box B are all essential. However, in box A, there are two statements, and in box B, the two statements are merged together into one essential and enduring outcome. So, box B, the statement in box B is essential because it would provide the same knowledge, skills, and values that the learning outcomes in box A would provide. However, in box B, it is also an enduring outcome because despite being in the pandemic or despite being in the online learning setup, the students would be able to do this, and the teacher would be able to curate the activity that would satisfy this learning outcome in this setup. So that is why the learning outcomes in box B is an essential and enduring outcome. Okay, now here is another example of unit outcomes for the course purposive communication. In the general education curriculum, the two current outcomes will be merged only into one outcome to address the essentials. So in box A, again, the current unit outcome for purposive education. First, it says here determine culturally appropriate terms, expressions, and images, sensitivity to gender, race, class, etc. Second, determine cultural and intercultural awareness and sensitivity in communication of ideas. And in box B, the modified statement of outcome as essential. Use culturally and interculturally appropriate terms, expressions, and images in communication of ideas. So, the two examples in box A and box B show how learning outcomes can be reduced during the times of the pandemic by putting two together into one as an essential. And these examples can also be applied to learning outcomes in teacher education. So let's go back to the example. In box A, there are two statements once again. However, in box B, this is merged together into an enduring and essential outcome. So this is an essential outcome or a needed outcome because here, in the learning outcome stated for purposive communication, it would teach the students to be tactful in expressing their opinions and what they know about sensitive or culturally sensitive or appropriate topics. And for example, in ethics or in the course in another general education course called understanding the self, we talk about these very sensitive topics, and the course purposive communication would provide the students the skills, the knowledge, and the understanding that they would need in order for them to be able to express their ideas and their own opinions in a tactful manner, that in a way in such a way that they would not be offending any subcultures or just anybody in general. And this is an enduring outcome because this is an outcome that can be achieved despite being in the online modality, and it It would provide the students the knowledge, the skills, the understanding, among others, that they would need as a human person. Because as humans, we are supposed to be able to express our opinions and our ideas in a tactful manner, in a manner that respects everyone, okay? So, now that we have talked about how we modify the curriculum through through mapping the needed and enduring outcomes in the recommended and the written curriculum, let us now talk about rearranging of the college course offerings. So another way of modifying the curriculum during the pandemic is to rearrange the course offerings. For example, the theories and concept courses that can be delivered online may be offered in the first 2 years, while face to face delivery is not yet possible due to the risk of infection, and the laboratory based field of study and the practicum courses can be offered later when face to face modality is already feasible. So, if the courses back in the days of the face-to-face delivery were very much mixed together, where there is a mix of the courses with the practicums and the laboratory experiments along with the theoretical courses. In this setup, we placed the theoretical courses first in the first 2 years of college students, and then placed the laboratory based and the courses with the requirements of practicum in the latter years of the college studies, because we are we are trying to make sure that the students, or we are trying as much as possible for the students to attain or to not miss out on any of the skills and the knowledge that they would gain from the interactive practicum and laboratory based concepts by not administering them or by not giving them in the online modality, because as we know, the online modality is very limited only. So by placing the theoretical courses in the first 2 years during this pandemic, we are ensuring that you still get the knowledge and the skills that you need from, or that you should be getting, rather, that you should be getting from these theoretical courses, because they do not need much face-to-face interaction, and they do not need for you to perform anything that is unlike the courses that requires laboratory experimentations and practicums like PE. So that is the reason behind that. And it is also that we presume that in 4 years, so in the latter parts, or in 3 years, that is why we placed the courses with the most practicum in the latter 2 years. That is because we are hoping that after 3 or so years, the pandemic would ease and the pandemic would hopefully end, and the situation would be better for you to come back to school and be able to perform these laboratory experiments and the practicums that would maximize or further your learning about those courses. Okay, so now that we have talked about the rearranging of the college course offerings, and we have talked about mapping the needed and enduring outcomes in the recommended and written curriculum, let us talk about the other ways by which we modified the curriculum to adapt to this setup. So, to talk to us about the offerings of Cognate courses related to the pandemic and for the modification of other aspects of the curriculum, let us call on and listen to Serbian. Serbian?
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Althea, for discussing and talking to us about those topics. So now that we have an idea on what we need to focus on when modifying curriculum, and we have been introduced to the fact that there have been a rearrangement of college courses offerings, let us ask deeper and discuss. The third one is offering of elective or cognate courses that relate to the pandemic. and global health crisis, it is imperative that the curriculum be adjusted by offering courses that are needed to survive. And those courses are change management, disaster risk management, flexible learning, teaching strategies, resilient education, alternative assessment, remote teaching, health and mental awareness, instructional materials development for blended learning, active learning principles and practices, psychosocial support during crisis. But we will focus on certain courses. First is the change management. So change management, it, it is systematic approach to dealing with the transition or transformation of an organization goals, processes, or technologies. The purpose of change management is to implement strategies for effecting change, controlling change, and helping people to adapt to change. Second one is flexible learning and teaching strategies. Flexible learning strategies often refer to the design of physical spaces as a mechanism for supporting student learning centered and personalized instruction. The third one is health and mental wellness. Mental health awareness means that we are not only acknowledging that mental health is important, but we are talking about it, putting it out that so that people who feel too much can get help they need to. Awareness is acceptance and understanding of something. It part of whole. Active learning principle and practices. Student required to reflect on the meaning of what they learned. Give students the opportunity to negotiate goals. Enable students to critically evaluate different ways and means of learning the content. And the last one is psychosocial support during crisis. In this COVID-19 pandemic brought it wake up an unforeseen mental health crisis. The World Health Organization published a guideline as a way of supporting mental health and psychosocial well-being of different groups during this pandemic. The impact of pandemic has pushed government to put measure in place of curb not only the physical health of individuals but their mental health and psychosocial well-being as well. Number 4 is modifying the taught curriculum. Another way of modifying the curriculum and ensuring learning continuity during this pandemic is the implication of multiple learning delivery modalities, considering that face-to-face modality is not feasible. Teacher may be considered flexible distance learning option like correspondence teaching, module-based learning, project-based learning, television broadcast learning, and for those learners with internet connectivity, computer-assisted instruction, synchronous online learning, and asynchronous online learning, collaborative e-learning may be considered. And modifying taught curriculum considering that face-to-face is not a feasible. So the tendency the teacher consider flexible distance learning like module-based learning, project-based learning, and television broadcasts. Yun yung mga ginagawa ng ating mga school like public and private school. They have module-based learning, project-based learning, and television. The last one is television broadcast na pinapalabas sa TV na meron tayong channel na appropriate channel na pwedeng manood ang mga bata ng iba't ibang lesson katulad ng English, Math, Science, and iba pa. And for those naman na afford matuto in online learning, Merong mga school na merong online learning, like the Bindward College of Calapan, offering sila na magkaroon ng online learning. Meron silang asynchronous learning and synchronous learning. PEEP is modifying the assessed curriculum. Adjustment on the assessment measure can be also considered amid this pandemic. There is need to limit requirements and focus on major essential projects that measure that enduring learning outcomes like case scenario, problem-based activities, and capstone project. Authentic assessment have to be intensified to ensure that competencies are acquired by the learners in process of modifying the curriculum amid this pandemic. It must be remembered that initiative and evaluation tasks must be anchored on what the learners need, including their safety and well-being. So for us, for teacher, it is hard to measure the skills, the knowledge of every student. But as a teacher, we need to be more flexible, and in that, sa mga every subject, nagkakaroon sila ng assessment and evaluation, which means this is very important for us to measure, to assess our student kung meron nga ba silang natutunan or wala. And in doing that, teacher should be adjust on what assessment and what performance rather na ibibigay nila sa kanilang student. Ayan. Dahil na-discuss na natin in modifying assessed curriculum, modifying the taught curriculum, and offering of elective and cognate courses that relate to pandemic. Okay, so now that we have talked about and discussed the topic about curriculum modification, class, are you still with me? Okay, thank you so much for being attentive and responding. And at this point in our discussion, allow me to call on Miss Hazel Hamilia and Miss Dominica Calibara to talk to you about and discuss the curriculum consideration. Miss Hamilia and Miss Calibara.